in Victoria. Things go from bad to worse for the Victorian government when it comes to their spending and project planning. Now, you would know, if you live in Melbourne, about the Metro Tunnel. They're trying to build a metro like they did in New South Wales. The one in New South Wales works quite well, I have to say, in Sydney. So Melbourne said, oh, well, we better do that as well. And you would think this thing is meant to open later in the year, that it would all be hunky-dory. The new ticketing system would be ready to go because the state government has spent $1.7 billion rebuilding the marquee system so you can use a credit card or your mobile phone to tap on. But no, when they open up the whiz-bang new metro later this year, you won't be able to tap on with your mobile phone, which means that they're going to put in brand spanking new ticketing scanners for the old system, which this time next year they will rip out to replace with brand spanking new scanners for the new system. Isn't it great what happens when government departments talk together and work so well? Matthew Guy, who's the Shadow Minister for Public Transport in Victoria, former leader, of course, of the Liberal Party down there, and I am told a train enthusiast, said it's a special link of incompetence to stuff up a ticketing system before the new tunnel is even open. It's hard to believe that the most expensive rail project in Victoria's history wasn't built for 21st century ticketing. Yes, nothing lines up in Victoria, and that is why all of their big projects have in just 1 year blown out by $11.6 billion. Yes, 11.6 billion with a B dollars. No wonder this state is effectively broke. Now, there's a story we'll get to in the papers on the front of the Herald Sun a bit later. Jacinta Allen's coming up with a plan to try and claw some of this money back, which is quite brave, as Sir Humphrey Appleby would say,
Caleb,
for a Labor government. But how do you blow projects out by $11.6 billion in 1 year?
Well, I think you described it in your opening. They invented this brand new ticketing system. I mean, you and I went home last night on the Metro here in Sydney, and we got out our credit card,
bang,
and we tapped on and we tapped off. It works perfectly in Sydney. So you would have thought the Victorian government didn't need to reinvent the wheel. They could have just looked to another state like New South Wales and copied the system that works perfectly here. But no, they had to start from scratch, and taxpayers are now paying. You know, most businesses have a motto: do something once and do it right. In Victoria, they do something 3 times at 10 times the price. And that's how Victoria has gotten into the state it's in, with, a forecast $188 billion worth of debt by 2028. The Victorian Treasurer, I love this, Jacqueline Symes, who I'm not sure that she's that good with money, but she's very good with optimism and trying to encourage people.
She's no good with understanding her job, because we did the story a couple of weeks ago about how she told the Treasury staff not to talk to her in economic terms. Well, she didn't understand them.
Well, perhaps that explains her statement today. She said, and I quote, "The Victorian economy is going from strength to strength. Having said that, I'm very conscious it's not translating to households and families." Well, if it's not translating to households and families, who's it going from strength to strength for, Lucy?
In their own eyes, again, they're pushing their own propaganda to try and convince everybody that this government hasn't totally destroyed this once great state. Really, that's what they have to do. Consider everything that's going on down there in Victoria, right? Escalating crime, cops on strike, the levies that they introduced right before Christmas, right, which punished businesses, people, farmers, all of these great people who are suffering already under the strain of the cost of living crisis. Then the Airbnb tax, right? Remember that? Only a few days ago, a story emerged where that is really impacting victims of domestic violence, right? And how they're unable to actually access these spaces because of the taxes that they've introduced here. And now it's almost as if it's become a running joke, the amount of debt that they have invested in the state themselves, and it's all because of the Labor government.
Because
of the Labor government. And I have to say this, the worst part about the whole Mikey drama, right, is this point. The NTT Data, right, they're the technology company that used to have it. Had they retained their particular contract with respect to this, they could have grandfathered the old technology, which would have saved taxpayers millions of dollars. But Conduit, who's taken over it, don't actually have the certification to be able to do that. So now it's just cost upon cost, poor planning. They can't manage the state. It's clear. And the Allen government are just, they are, as I said, they're a running joke. How much longer do Victorians have to suffer through this? Where are we now? We're February February 2025.
There'll be an election next
2026
year.
November next year. They still
you
have to
mentioned
tolerate
the Allen
this
government, and
nonsense.
maybe that's a key to why things are so bad, because Jacinta Allen, before she was the Premier, she was the Minister for the Commonwealth Games. Remember the Commonwealth Games?
Oh, that went down
Paid
well.
millions for
need
to
it.
not hold. She was also the Minister for Transport and Infrastructure. We know what's happening with infrastructure costs. She was also the Minister for the Suburban Rail Loop, and she was the Minister for Major Projects, which, as we said, have blown out by $11 billion in the last 12 months. Talk about failing upwards. Now she's the Premier of the state. With a resume like that, there is no way you would get any job in the public sector. You wouldn't be allowed to make coffee at my local cafe with that kind of resume, and yet she's running the state, and we wonder why it goes from bad to worse.